Hello, and welcome to Kier Here, a podcast where I interview weirdo artists, writers, and makers about what they do. I'm your host, Kier Adrian Gray, and our guest for today's inaugural episode is Nate Nate Nainers, a writer, community builder, and all-round sweethearted perv. Welcome to the show, Nate.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much.
We're happy to have you. You have a book coming out with Wharfinger's Press, complete with illustrations by Channy-B. It's gonna be sick as hell is the title. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Let's see. I started writing it in 2020. I'm a Serb baby. I sucked on the teat of Justin Trudeau for 6 months, and that was my my little sneak peek into what universal basic income could be. And I was like, hey, why not do something different? so I just started writing. It was great. I've always been a writer, but I don't know, I just reconnected with it and just kind of got into a flow. Pumped out story after story after story, called Chance. Chance and I somehow got in touch and we just started talking on the phone, and it was supposed to be like a 10-story zine. Now it's like a 28-story book. I didn't really have the intention of it being about masculinity. But when I kind of like take a step back from the project, take a step back from my writing, it's like, yeah, there really is like this strong theme of masculinity and masculine issues. I don't hit all the big topics. I don't hit all the, what's the word? I'm not hitting all the hot issues, but I'm hitting the issues that are hot to me, Kier. So
What a great way to put it. The issues that are hot to me personally. That makes sense.
It's just what came out. I'm a very want to be. I find my writing when I have tried to write as a way to speak to certain issues before. And when I am intentionally saying, I'm going to speak about this issue or whatever, I notice my writing suffers in a way. It doesn't become, first off, it doesn't flow very well as like writing it. And then two, I don't even really have anything all that interesting to say about it. I'm just kind of saying what everyone else is saying about it. And I was like, cool, good job, me. I wrote a story that says something everyone else is saying. So I just decided, let everyone else say it better than me, and I'll just kind of work on what I'm writing. So
well, and I just don't think we can go too much farther without giving people a taste of exactly what came out when you decided to write from yourself. Would you tell us a story?
Yeah, sure. I got a little story in here called Danger Crab, and it goes a little something like this. Okay. Work was brutal one summer. I felt like throwing in the towel multiple times, but I decided to use that towel to mop up the blunders and fuck-ups. But the mopping took a toll, so by the end of the season, I was worn out and tattered. Yes, I had tried yoga and juice cleanses and meditation, even went on a weekend Zen retreat, but I was still stressed out. So I did what everyone does when they're at their wits' end. I went to the beach for answers. But no matter how many times I baptized myself in that crisp ocean, the spirit did not fill me. But then I caught the sight of an old woman meditating on a log. She looked serene, as if everything was as it should be. Should have been doing that daily, I thought. So I sat on the same log and reminded myself now is always the best time to return to the practice. Truly, the world is full of teachers if you have eyes to see and ears to hear. Her stillness and commitment encouraged me to breathe thoroughly. At first, my lungs were tight, but each exhale let out more and more turgid air until my chest was relaxed. At that moment, my body was tranquil. Yet what raced through my mind was looming deadlines, pending phone calls, and my boss's knee-jerk reactions to any and all blips and blunders. I thought maybe a beer would do the trick, just 1 to 6 beers to clear the mind. But just as I stood up, I felt a sharp pinch on my bum. Snip, snip, cried the old woman with crouched legs and a straight back, her arms upright at 90-degree angles. I'm the danger crab. Her face looked completely serious. Yes, the world is full of teachers, so instantly I remembered the antics of the Zen master from the retreat. Maybe this was her koan. Maybe this whole summer led up to this teaching moment in a display of karmic webs. I felt intimidated by her spiritual confidence, so I awkwardly bowed to her in response, as a thanks for reminding me of the now. But she scuttled behind me and pinched my bum again. Danger crab! Danger crab! She cried. So I mumbled, one must pinch through the ego to find yourself, I said, rigidly bowing again. But she pinched my bum a third time, then scuttled sideways down the beach, pinching everyone else's bum, announcing she's the danger crab. That's when I realized that she could very well be insane. But surprise to me, everyone loved it. Everyone thought it was hilarious. Some of them even wanted pictures of their butts being pinched by this completely deranged woman. Perhaps it was Alzheimer's or dementia or a whole host of other mental illnesses cutting her off from reality. I'm the danger crab, she cried, as she chased a giggling and screaming little girl, pinching her legs. Danger! Danger! She hollered, as I felt more and more sorry for her. Yes, said an old man who I didn't notice was sitting near me. There goes batshit Betty. Always something interesting with that one. Is she all right? I asked, motioning to my head. Are you all right? He asked, leaning in, motioning to his head too. I've been better, I sighed. You know, he whispered, you could be a danger crab. Oh, that's not really. The old man stood up, then interrupted me by putting his bum in front of me. Go on, be a danger crab. I tensed up, but the old man's eyes twinkled as he chuckled. What else were you going to do? I found myself talking to his bum, my words stiff and wooden. I was going to have a drink, I think. His bum bounced with laughter. Have a drink? And do what? Bitch and whine about work? I was embarrassed he knew so quickly, so I began to describe how hectic my job was. But he just bounced his bum, humming a little tune, while coyly saying to himself, I sure hope there's no danger crabs here. So, just to shut him up, I pinched his bum. But he whipped around and commanded me not to smile, which caused me to smirk against my will. I said no smiling, he boomed. Nope, no smiling on this beach, and don't even think about laughing. Hey, cut that out. Absolutely no giggling. Then he had a look of horror on his face. Oh no, you really are a danger crab. Then he shouted to everyone nearby. Everyone, look out! There's another danger crab here, and he'll pinch your bum! Everyone joined in calling out, oh no, not another danger crab! So bending to the will of the crowd, I crouched down with my back straight, my arms upright at 90-degree angles. I slowly scuttled towards the old man while everyone cheered me on. And when I pinched his bum again, Everyone burst out laughing with attaboys while I blushed. Then a little boy ran up to me and giggled, "You can't catch me, Danger Crab." So what was I to do but chase this little boy around the beach while more and more children joined in the fun, all of us laughing and screaming and losing track of time. And no, danger crabs are much too busy to think about work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was really not trying to interrupt your audio with laughing, and it was extremely difficult for me, and I think I made a lot of really ridiculous faces while I was trying to do that. So that gives a really excellent taste of it's gonna be sick as hell. You never know what you're going to get. Yeah. And one thing that I really enjoyed, and I noticed this the first time that I saw you tell a story, it was on stage in the lobby of the ACT Theater in Maple Ridge. And your stories started off realistic, as if you were recounting something that had happened to you. And then at a certain point, it just took this completely surreal twist and careened off in this other direction. And I'm really curious. It was striking to me the first time I saw it, and it was striking again in this book. So I was wondering, like, is this like a technique that you have consciously chosen, or is it something that just bubbled up from the nether regions? Or
I am a shameless tall tailer, and I tall tail in any opportunity I can get. It's conversational for me. So yeah, it makes for good writing, I think. So yeah, I'd say it's a little conscious. I definitely say it's a little conscious. I do. I like to see my favorite thing when I'm telling a tall tale on stage is to see at which point is it too ridiculous for the audience. You know, when do they clue in that this has all been a ride and none of this is true, or very little of it is true. And I don't know, that's just I just love seeing that. And yeah, it's how I get my kicks, Kier.
You certainly do. I've heard some tales of coworker interactions, and one thing is particularly the food doula. I don't know if that is something that you feel like sharing at this moment.
I can share it.
Be my guest.
So April Fool's is my favorite. I think it should be a holiday, but April Fool's Day is my favorite tradition ever. And I really kind of go wild on that day. And I told people at work that I'm a food doula, that I'm going to LA to learn how to be a food doula. And everyone's like, "Oh, what's that?" Like, you know, at first they're kind of, "Oh, interesting, like food doula." I'm like, yeah, like I help with the passage of food. And they're like, "What?" I'm like, yeah, like, you know how people get plugged up and everything. They need a food doula. They need a food doula to kind of like help them with their diet, do some like deep spiritual cleansing,
like a human laxative, if you will.
Yeah, I really guide them through this. Like, it's a really uncomfortable experience to be plugged up, you know. So I get them on their stirrups and I just help them breathe, and I help them carry this food baby to term. And yeah, I was telling that, and everyone believed me. And I told it to this one older guy at work, and he was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. How much do you get paid for that? I'm like, oh, in LA, you can get like $10,000 a pop. He's like, well, sounds like you got a career then. Like, all the power to you. But
how wholesome. What a wholesome response to complete BS, to be like, well, to each their own. Good for you. It's delightful. And one thing that I loved about It's Gonna Be Sick as Hell is a lot of it takes place in these working class job scenarios. And there are really interesting interactions. Like it's like you're taking a construction site or a factory floor as a legitimate place of inquiry, both literally and slapstick wise. That's something I really enjoyed as someone who's worked in, kitchens and a variety of these types of places. I don't see a lot of stories that take place in those sorts of environments.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the writers that get attention are kind of like office workers because they have spare time at their desk, and so they can spend hours and hours while being paid to work on their stories, or their students, their students. And but yeah, I don't know, they're and you see it a lot in like Hollywood, especially, where everyone is upper middle class, has giant houses, has like these amazing careers and everything like that. And that's just not my experience. And I don't want to pretend it's my experience. I don't want to pretend I know what that experience is about. And if someone wants to write about that, all the power to them. But I'm a naturally curious person. I'm naturally a bit of a trickster. So I do like to see all the fun that's had in these sort of situations. Because I feel like people kind of get into these sorts of jobs and then they get depressed that they're not like some business exec or something like that. I have a coworker like that right now who is losing money left, right, and center, trying to get into Bitcoin and trying to get into, like, he wants to be a day trader and he is always losing money. And it's like, hey man, like, this is actually, like, this isn't a bad job where we don't have much demand on our minds, on ourselves or whatever, and we just get to have even on our most chaotic days, I forget about that job 5 minutes into my commute home, and I get to come home and I get to work on stories and everything. And yeah, it is. And I don't know, there's just so many interesting characters in places like these. And what I really appreciate about grunt labor is that you get some pretty raw people. That it's not customer service. It's not like, you don't need to know email speak or anything. You just kind of say it. You say however you are feeling in that moment. You can go into work with a really sour mood or whatever, and people are like, okay, well, as long as the boxes are being stacked, I don't give a shit if Tom's in a bad mood, or if, like, Diane is, even hangovers or whatever, people don't. So yeah, it brings in colorful characters, and I find, yeah, just that freedom to just kind of be however you want to be in that moment. That freedom is, I have worked office jobs, and it's kind of, yeah, everyone's being fake with each other, you know, in a way, and everyone's trying to keep appearances that they have they're cool, calm, and collected and everything. But they're just people too, you know. They want to
Yeah.
lash out. They want to say, like, they want to yell at a customer or a client or something and tell them to fuck off and stop wasting their time. But they do that privately and only with trusted people that they can trust, that that conversation won't get to the boss or won't get to HR or
Yeah.
something. There's all this like secretive. And so I do think like the office is an interesting place, but that's just not where my interests are. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I've never really thought before about how in office jobs there is this certain expectation that you're like micromanaging your emotions, and people, I think, generally choose quite carefully what they share and what they don't. And mood is huge. I mean, in certain work environments, yes, you will get in trouble if you're grumpy.
Yeah.
You know, front facing, you know, customer service type of stuff. So it is interesting. And that's another part of these jobs that you really bring in, is like the types of conversations, right? Like there's some really profound stuff. There's also some vulgarity, and the way it all comes together is really striking, I think.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think I've had some beautiful moments working in landscaping or warehouses or wherever. I've had some real connections with people, and I think you can just connect with anybody if you're willing to be real enough.
Mhm.
And it's way easier doing it landscaping. I've had some pretty interesting heart to hearts with landscapers and stuff,
Mhm.
you know, because they're willing to tell you that they came into work off of, and they're like hungover, and that they had a cocaine bender the night before, or that they're
Mhm.
like all this type of stuff, you know. And people are like, okay, cool. Well, like let's pick some weeds.
Well, and that's, you know, I think another thing that just felt very different to me about your book was the way that, like, you're also bringing yourself into these spaces, and you're writing about queer people, right? And I think I've read a lot of stories about queer characters who are maybe at a dance party or at a potluck, or, and everywhere is interesting. But I don't think I realized until I read your book that I was missing stories about queer landscapers or navigating queerness at a construction site. And we are back after some minor technical difficulties. So, one thing I found compelling is the way that you bring queerness into the landscaping jobs and the factories. And I hadn't realized until I was reading your book how rarely I've seen that before.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I am queer. I am bisexual. My gender is gorgeous, is the which is the technical term. Yeah, and I am open at my workplaces, which are traditionally very heteronormative, and to top it off, very patriarchal. And yeah, I it's not like a mission of mine to like turn this space queer, but I am queer. I am in this space. I am allowed to be myself in this space. So here I am, and deal with it. And I've had lots of very interesting conversations with people who could be closeted themselves or whatever. But when I first started exploring my gender expression and kind of coming to terms with that, I had a coworker that was giving me the whole like, oh yeah, well I identify as like some sort of war helicopter or something like that, and which was a meme. I've seen this meme a little bit in like some incel Reddit communities.
Right.
But
Yes.
and even just the other day, I had a coworker that told me I'm actually not queer. That I'm not
really?
queer. That I'm actually a straight man, and that everything I'm doing is pretending. And it's I had a talk like at first. I don't know, with that coworker. We had already built a relationship. Like we'd already built kind of like this camaraderie. We cracked lots of jokes with each other. And kind of what I saw in that interaction is this guy, definitely a guy, or maybe not. I mean, who knows what's going on for him? But is that there's a conversation going on, and he is sussing me out if he can really tell me what he thinks about everything, and we're actually he's being honest about what he thinks, his ideas of what queerness means, that if I was really queer, I'd be wearing dresses, I wouldn't have, which I do, but I wouldn't have the beard, I would have makeup, I would have high heels, I would have, he had this very like elaborate sort of like what I should be doing. And it's like, okay, well, we have already made a connection over shooting the shit, and now the conversation's getting more real and definitely more personal. So I'm going to keep that conversation open. And, I'm not going to jump down on him to and just kind of like, and I feel like, yeah, I could be justified in jumping at him and clapping back and being like, fuck you, I'm taking you to HR or whatever. But my goals is to get this guy to broaden his mind a little bit about the queer community and maybe himself. And so that's kind of been my attitude with these spaces that I move in and am a part of. And that's kind of like my attitude with this book, is that like all these characters aren't, not all of them are stated as queer or are doing obvious things that are queer, but there is kind of like a little queer element to them. So, and it is kind of like a it's an act of like writing some of these stories has been kind of like an act of fantasy of or even just lived experience of having connections like on deeper levels with coworkers and in those heteronormative patriarchal spaces, and just being like, I'm queer and you can ask me questions, and we can, maybe you can even get into kind of like the queer mindset, and be a little queer yourself. So you don't have to be like, I don't know, it's kind of, I have some, I don't know, I don't want to like, I don't know, it just kind of seems like queer is definitely like a sexuality thing and a gender thing, but there's also definitely like a lot of mindset in there, and like there is a culture, and I think that there can be cultural exchange, and these stories are what if it was a queer landscaping company, what if it was a queer warehouse, what if it was a queer queer Wild Wild West, or or you
Or
know,
if all hockey dads were gay. What
yeah.
if? There's a story about that. Yeah, I love what you're saying because I don't have a study to cite here, but my understanding about how people become less bigoted and how people stop having stereotypes about groups of people is they meet someone from that group and they speak with someone and they develop a relationship of some sort,
Yeah.
a coworker relationship or a neighborly relationship. It's really difficult to hold on to stereotypes about a group of people once you actually start to meet them. So there's something to that. And I mean, if he picks up your book, like just the sheer number of dicks that are sucked in there might give
You're
them a little
thinking of
something to
most
chew on.
valuable primate, aren't you? You're thinking of most valuable primate. There's a lot of dick sucking in that one.
Yes, spoiler alert. But there's, when you're talking about, queer as a mindset, like there's a real fluidity to your stories. There's the level I spoke of earlier, switching between the real and the surreal, and like very easily, like it works. There's a flow to it. But there's also flow between profound or difficult or earnest moments to silly or ridiculous moments almost instantly, and almost in a way that like gets a laugh or a gasp out of your reader. You also move between anecdote and fable and folktale and back again. Tell me about the process that creates such fluidity.
I have the gift of the gab. Okay, I'll give you something. I'll give you something.
That's why this
So,
interview isn't over yet. Gift of the gab. Go on.
yeah. My process. I mean, my process is influenced by a number of things. I would say, I don't know. I am a schizoaffective person, so I am prone to magical thinking, and story writing, right? Just creative fiction is a way of me kind of airing out those sort of tendencies, um, but also, oh man, yeah, I'd say, um, yeah, process. Sorry, I don't. I did learn this kind of thing. It's called, it could get me in the hot seat, but basically,
Ooh.
yeah, I studied very briefly spirit journeying
Hmm.
by a Celtic. Uh, she didn't call herself. She called herself a shamanic practitioner, and she kind of went into the language of shaman and all this type of stuff, and like the history that there are no long-standing Celtic shamans because they were all murdered and all this type of stuff. Um, anyway, long story short, yeah, she's taught us how to get into these trance states and just kind of like follow. Another term that she uses is creatively engaged meditation, where you just allow your mind to unfold and a narrative just happens to come up. You know, you get into this trance state and you open a door, and now you're just kind of going through, and your mind makes this story. And I do that with my story writing, where I start and I have no idea where I'm going with this, and I don't have anything premeditated, and it just kind of goes and flows. And I engage sometimes, like, oh, it'd be really funny if this happened, or like, oh, like what about this? But most of the part is just kind of like just getting it. It really helped me get into flow state, and I definitely, that's a very wanky way of saying that I like to have fun when I write. Because that really is, at the end of the day, my process is just writing what will be fun to write, writing what will be fun for me to read, fun for me to tell people, and just getting really in touch with how I like to play. I've moved in lots of circles where I felt like my leisurely needs weren't being met, and just how I like to spend time, what I would like to do with my time off, and moved in raver scenes and moved in high energy political scenes and everything, and just kind of never quite met those needs, which there's a whole discussion on play therapy and all this type of stuff. And writing is one of those, like, it does that for me, where it's like, no one can tell me how to write this book. No one can tell me how to write these stories. I'm just going to write what will entertain me, trusting that other people will be entertained by it, because I'm not in a vacuum. I'm not the only person like me. So, yeah, I think honestly, yeah, forget the spirit journey stuff. It's a sense of,
we'll just scrub that.
Yeah, it's a sense of play. It's a sense of play, and just going for a rip, and yeah.
That's really interesting to hear, because you write good endings. They're often surprising or illuminating or something. And to know that that comes out of that sort of, I don't know where I'll end up mindset is striking. I also just love that part of your process is so counter to the advice, if you're like, how to become a writer, into the internet, right? Like, think of your audience, and something like, to write a book that's unlike anything else that I've come across could only be achieved by writing to please yourself and your particular sensibilities, and to trust that would resonate outwards. One thing that stood out to me was that anyone who reads Sick as Hell cannot even get past the dedication without encountering your sense of humor. Why does humor matter to you, or what does it do for you?
Humor is very healing for me, and there is kind of like a trick of the trade that I kind of learned, is that people open up to something after they laugh. If you want to, I mean, speakers do this all the time, where they crack a joke with the audience, they get them to loosen up, and then they get into their lecture, or they have like little jokes kind of like put throughout it. And I find like humor is just it's just who I am. I just love humor, so I'm just going to be myself in that. But it also it opens up the reader to, by laughing, it opens them up to what I'm trying to say, I guess, to darker themes, to anything really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of darker themes, I think there's this interplay between the sacred and the profane in these stories. And saying that they encounter each other, that doesn't quite capture it. You could almost say they are going down on each other, figuratively speaking, of course. But it feels like you find a way to honor the profane without denigrating the sacred. And I find that really compelling. I'm wondering if there is a message there. Do you think there's a message there?
I'll never tell. Yeah, there is. So my relationship with art, with creativity, with all that type of stuff is being a trickster. And one of the sacred roles of a trickster is to, throughout global mythology, all this type of stuff, is to literally shit on things. And there is kind of this, and they figuratively shit on things too, but what's his name? Lewis Hyde wrote a book called Tricksters Make the World. And that was really influential and validating for me, and kind of gave me a direction that shitting on things is so that, like if we get into like a metaphorical sense, you shit on a seed, and then that's like defaming the seed, but then the seed is actually getting the nutrients from that shit, and now it can sprout into something new, So there's lots of examples of the sacred being taken down a notch so we can have a new understanding of the sacred, and so we can have a new connection to the sacred. And the shit cycle forever floweth. It forever floweth out of my ass here.
Spoken like a true landscaper. Spoken like a true landscaper.
But yeah, but I really do think that, like, if we do want to see change, we do need to we need to be able to speak against things, and we need to be able to have a laugh at things, and having a laugh, if you have the attitude that having a laugh at this is a way to honor it so that people will come to have a new relationship with it, then I think that's a great thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that really sort of brings me back to you talking about masculinity as this theme that sort of emerged as you wrote these various stories. And I think it is a topic that has a lot of weight in the current culture wars, and I don't know how deep to get into that, but I think there's something really important about like finding the fun in that, and playing with masculinity and stretching it and seeing how elastic it is. And
oh man, yeah, I mean, masculinity is such a rigid attitude, concept, adoption, or whatever. It is a very rigid thing. And I am AMAB. I grew up to be masculine, to be a man, and all this type of stuff. And I do, for kicks, follow some like men's advice Instagram accounts and stuff. And it is wild how much of this information that is being shared with other men is to be cold, to just be cold with people, and to be a threatening force, that no one wants to fuck with you. And there's so much of masculinity that is like, you take up the space, so no one, it is all, it seems like so much of it is really focused on don't fuck with me, to be that protector, to be that sort of like domineering force. And like, once you kind of clue in that like so much of this performance is just, they're scared of being hurt, it really kind of makes it sad, and I think it is important to play with masculinity and to bring playfulness into masculinity, because it's a human need, like it really is sad that there are so many men that think their time on this earth, where there's so many ways to spend your time on earth, and people really do think it's about being some like high octane business exec, and
Yeah.
just kind of like this, and that's how they get their respect, is or just being super domineering or threatening or all this type of stuff. And yeah, it's sad. It's sad that these men can't just play with each other, and even the games that they play with each other are like, you look at, they're all competitive, there's so much
Yeah.
there's so much competitiveness in the leisure time with other men, that it's just like you're always proving yourself to the others, and I kind of touched on that in one of the stories, that nobody wants to be a loser. There's this kind of like underlying fear of being the laughing stock, the butt of the joke, and I'm on this end where I invite it. I invite being a silly Billy. Like, I go to a park with a silly hat on my head and I'm just kind of like having fun. I don't care what people think my gender is. I'm just kind of like gone for it and just being myself. And it really does shake people up a little bit. I definitely get some like glares in my direction, but I also get a lot of curiosity too. And
well, I don't know how we got this far into this interview without talking about how you're a wizard, which feels important. I'm so sorry that I left that out of your introduction.
yeah, I'm a wizard. Where's my pin? I got a little pin there that I'm actually a wizard, so it's official now, because I have the pin. But yeah, I started a collective, an initiative, or whatever, and just me and my friends get together in Vancouver and we spread joy, it for its own sake. Like, one of the wizards, actually my illustrator Channy-B, when we did this wizard walk, so for your viewers, we meet up at a place dressed as wizards, then we go on a long walk, sometimes like 4-hour walks, and we interact with people as wizards, and we play tricks for them, we tell them jokes, we have one-liners or whatever. I have these magic cards that are kind of like fortune-telling cards, but like really absurd. I think someone drew a card that said 10 butts and not one butt more. You're like, what does this mean? Like, you gotta think about it. This is your card, and you just that's what the universe wants you to see in this moment. And I'm not gonna tell you what it means. And it's funny, Channy-B really, or Ramshackle, I should say, had this beautiful moment where someone was like, why are you doing this? And Channy's response was like, because we like to, and it's just like, that's all it has to be. There's so much in our society. I feel there is so much pressure to always be defending your actions and always like stating that you have reasons behind your actions, and that you're constantly trying to prove to yourself or prove to others that what you're doing is worth your is valuable to society or to whatever. And if you were to just tell someone because I like to, then it kind of blows their mind. And it is, and there seems to be a trend with that, at least on online spaces, where it's like, oh yeah, you don't go to the beach because you like the sun and the water and you like swimming and you like picnics and all this type of stuff. You like the sand. It has nothing to do about that. It's about like, you know, finding chicks. It's about getting laid and like proving to yourself that you're an alpha male. It's about like, you know, or it's like about doing the Wim Hof method and like getting you know, getting this whole thing so you can be like a high functioning, hyper functioning, like professional or something. As like, yeah, that's why I go to the beach, is for the Wim Hof method.
Right, like optimizing even your leisure time.
I met a guy who ate what's it called, a Soylent. He ate this Soylent product, and he would eat it 3 times a day, and all he would have to do is just make this shake, because then he didn't have to think about food. And then he would read, but he would only read on double speed audiobooks, and like, you know, so he could like read quicker, and then he would waste less time. And it was just like, his life was just so structured to like, and just always trying to make more room for time, or more time for his projects. And we actually got into a bit of a bump, because like he was making some wild hot take or something like that, and I questioned it, and I was like, I don't really know about this. Like, why don't we think about this? Like, why don't we just kind of like imagine all the options of this idea, and like all the angles of this idea? Let's consider it. And his response was literally, I do not have time to consider things, you know? And it's just like, that is really scary. That, and he has like a podcast, and he's like a popular podcast, and he's kind of yeah, and he doesn't have, and he's just spitting fire every week with his co-host, and they're telling everybody how to be radicals, but he has no time to consider what he's spitting out. It's just like instant reaction. Is this radical? Okay, it's radical. So that's what the next episode is going to be about. And yeah, and it's kind of, you know, on one level, it's sad because hanging out with that person is just only about politics and his podcast. And that's all he has room for. And it's like, yeah, like you really, you know, there really is.
It brings me back to what you mentioned at the beginning about how when you found yourself wanting to write something with a particular message, you found yourself sounding like everyone else. And I think there's something important there, if you ask me. There's a difference between art and propaganda. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong. Wait, I was about to say there's nothing wrong with propaganda, but that sounds like something that could get me into trouble. But I think it is fine to make something with an explicit message. But when we get to the point where we think all art has to do that, I think we've lost the plot. And I'm glad that you brought up Channy-B, because these illustrations are so whimsical and mischievous. And Channy-B has a knack for capturing an entire story in a single picture.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Yeah, they do an amazing job. Yeah, I'm really happy with them. Yeah, I don't know. It was just one of those connections that it just really, really worked out. They love my stories. I love their illustrations. They're having Wharfinger's Press is actually setting up a separate web link just for Channy-B. So if you like Channy-B's illustrations, you can buy posters, either posters from the book or even just Channy-B's own posters or whatever. So yeah, no, they're an amazing illustrator, and they are always illustrating. Like, I have seen the birthday cards for myself and for others, and like, it'll just be this they get lost. They just totally get lost in the illustration. And yeah, they have a knack. Yeah.
They certainly have a knack. That's great to know that Channy-B's work will be at, I believe that's wharfingerspress.ca, and I'll put a link down below. And where can people find you online, Nate?
At Nate Nainers on Instagram. I am pretty much just on Instagram. If you want to be on my email list, just DM me your email, and I can reach out to you if you're interested in joining a wizard walk, or if you're into playing croquet while wearing a silly hat, or if you're interested in any of the shenanigans that I get up to.
Excellent. And you have a book launch coming up next week?
Yeah.
What are the details?
May 21st at the Bookcase in Maple Ridge. It's a soft launch, but copies will be sold. Yeah, the Bookcase is a pretty long-standing bookstore in Maple Ridge. It just got taken over by Robin. And yeah, she has graciously allowed me and Channy to just kind of talk with people. I'll read a couple stories, and I am thinking about doing like a nasal signature or something, like maybe getting ink on my nostrils and like dipping them onto books for people. But I also don't want to get high. I don't want to get high off the ink. So...
Excellent. Yeah, okay.
But I will sign books. So I will sign copies of books.
May 21st, the Bookcase in Maple Ridge. What time?
2 to 4 p.m.
2 to 4 p.m. Possible nasal signatures, but if not, signatures with the hand.
Yes, just kind of regular, but special. They'll be, yeah, they're going to be special.
But special. You heard it here first, folks. But special. And boy, are there plenty of butts in It's going to be sick as hell. You can also pre-order Nate's book at wharfingerspress.ca. I'll put all the links below here. And yeah, any last words for the people, my friend?
Keep being awesome.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any. I know you just set me up for having amazing endings and everything. But...
I mean, mine was going to be stay weird, y'all. So yeah, we're on the same wavelength here.
Yeah, be wild and weird. Be weird and wild. Yeah.
Should we try and coordinate some finger guns and call it a day?
Yeah, for sure.
1, 2, 3.